Okay, do I hear a motion to adopt the agenda?
I move we adopt the agenda.
Second?
Second it.
Motion made and second, those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, under new business of the lodging tax guidelines, we have the new updated version.
Did you get one of the new
We'll go over
updated
them.
versions?
Jeff, you took some out of
can
this,
she
you
edit
edited
that?
this.
I've edited it for grammar, and then I moved out the sample contract at the end.
Do you need this back?
And there's a cut in a few places, but I haven't had the full chance to. So there would be some other grammar edits that I would recommend. I'm gonna need to do for you guys, maybe look at
Okay,
adopting
well,
this
there's
next week.
one thing here, and it says activities not eligible.
What page are you on?
It's number 2, page 2. We got general administrative costs. And I think all of us misunderstood when the LCP came to us asking for that 25,000, that everybody thought it was for the Alger Theater, and it is not.
That wasn't my understanding.
No, well, could I
Go ahead.
interrupt here, because we did have a meeting, Jeff and Ginger and
And Logan.
and you were there,
Yeah,
and
Jeff.
Jeff. At which time, the fact that we misconstrued, and it wasn't entirely clear in that sentence, that this is not for just the Alger Theater. It's for all of the LCP, other projects going on. And so that part of it, you know, we need to correct, and we're going to have a work session with them after we get this done to clarify what they're doing and what their other grant sources are and so on. So anyway, I don't want to.
I would point out, if this was adopted at next week's meeting, that would, and it also depends, you guys have a few decisions to make. One, you need to make a decision of whether or not all of the lodging tax funds are going to be subject to this grant process, because you don't have to. You could just do a percentage. You could say, you know what, we want to keep 25% or 30% or something like that for larger projects we want to fund. And then this is the pot that's available to everybody, you know, on an application basis. And that's what a lot of jurisdictions have done is, for example, this is based on Newburgh's. This is a portion of Newburgh's. Newburgh has this, and then they have a large campaign they're doing, you know, with a visitor center and a toll tourism agency that Newburgh has itself. And so that's kind of so it depends on the council's pleasure about kind of what you guys are thinking about. Because if these guidelines are adopted for everything, then a larger project like LCP's that had a staff member or something for long-term strategic planning, or potentially, I think the other one that was done was the strategic planning, you know, which kind of like what we did for the town, you know, for that strategic planning for further development. There would be some issues with that thing under these guidelines. Both of those are potentially legal for you guys to do, but if you adopt these guidelines, then your own standards will make those ineligible requests. So I think we have two issues here. Do these guidelines that you're looking at, do you want them for everything? Because you could adopt these guidelines and say, you know what, we're going to go 30% is going to be for this open thing, and that's for your more smaller projects, things of that nature. Even Klamath County they have a very similar grant process to this for small, medium, and large, and the criteria are different because obviously, you know, smaller stuff, you don't want to be paying some of these, you know, some fly-by-night organizations admin costs when it's $1,000 ask for a particular event. I mean, they need to be able to get the event together for something along those lines versus a longer term, like let's say you guys decided you wanted to open a visitor center. If you put this in effect, you guys would have to then do a new resolution to change these guidelines because then it's not eligible. Then you've committed the entire pot to this process. So that's something the council may want to consider.
Simply because of the administrative costs.
Yeah, and the salaries and things. And I think these guidelines that are looking at here, because we adopted them out of one that was a portion that was for smaller grants, that may limit you more than what you want.
So if the town is funding the project with the TLT funds, they don't have to adhere to these, they just have to adhere to the state laws.
Correct, no, what I'm saying is, if the town can, as long as you're within the state TLT things, you can do whatever you want within those guidelines. If you adopt these guidelines for applications, for everything, then you're stuck with those guidelines. They're your own standards. You just have made rules, you've adopted them.
But this is for applicants outside of the town of Lakeview.
Right, but do you want all applicants to have to be under that, or do you want part of it? In other words, do you want to be able to do bigger projects? Do you want to be able to do particular things? Because the way it's currently set up right now, this will commit the entire lodging tax fund to this process.
But it doesn't have to.
It doesn't have to if you guys have me change the resolution saying, okay, so the resolution that we have out there right now, the way it's currently written, this is going to subject the entire pot of 70% lodging tax funds to this process. If you guys want to do something different, then you can say, we are designating a certain percentage, for example, of these funds to this process, and then we are going to be able to make grants on our own, to either our own projects or a larger project that we think is.
So what I remember being discussed, because we kind of discussed this a little bit, whether or not we wanted to put, if you guys remember, whether we wanted to put an amount percentage for this grant application or not. And I think that, if I remember correctly, some of the discussion was, well, we don't have to put that limitation necessarily, because we don't have plans yet for, town projects, let's say.
Right, or bigger, but any applicant that came in would, if you adopt these guidelines as they are with the ban on administrative costs, salaries, things of that nature, then that grant applicant will be automatically rejected under the standards that you adopt. That's what the.
But we have just a certain pot of money, and if we allocate, say, 40% to something, and there's no applicants, then that money is just sitting there.
Correct.
And so.
Well, you could do it in terms of up to 40% is available for this, assuming there are no other projects. There's a lot of flexibility you can build into it. You don't have to just say percentages. You could say at least 15% is going to go to this and then the council can approve more beyond that. Like I said, there's a million different options here that you guys can do with kind of what
It all boils down to a percentage. I mean, I guess maybe I'm very way out in left field, but kind of like the idea of just taking the applications as they come in.
Yeah, and that's what I get, what you're saying is that if we put a stipulation, like she says 40%, none of those funds are used, and we have a big project, then we have to rewrite laws, ordinances, where if we just leave it ambiguous and no set number, the funds are there, and
but then,
anytime we have.
then you've limited what projects can apply to the limitations you're putting in there. So and that is totally within your purview to do that.
Yeah.
But
Well, what limitations do we have except the things that are not eligible for funding?
The limitation, if you go to page 2, activities not eligible for funding, general administrative costs,
Yeah,
salaries.
membership fees, project. We went through a lot of those before, but when we are saying general administrative costs, so would that pertain to the director that they're asking
Yes.
for?
As with salaries, add with operating costs.
But not to the
Also,
town.
is that something not allowed under state law, or can it be allowed under state law?
It's allowed under state law as long as it's actually for something, it is something that is allowed under state law. Remember, these guidelines were based on one of these smaller grant programs. So that's where those have come from. So those are just something
I
that,
don't think in our original draft that we had here.
This,
Well, not the general administrative cost.
yeah, it was.
Was it?
Yeah.
I guess
So
I missed that.
basically, it's kind of, so this thing is that, let's say this is what we want for our grant applicant restrictions. But that does not bind the town if they decide to open a visitor center, let's say.
correct, this would just be for grant applicants.
Grant
But
application.
this, like I said, this does limit third parties coming in and asking for funds.
And while it's legal for us to allow those, such as, director for LCP, the payment the activities of that person would have to be 100% tourism related. So they would have to be.
It wouldn't have to be 100% tourism related. What they could, there is another mechanism of doing it, which is a fund approach, which is, okay, we are donating this much money to this executive director, X percentage of this person's time, and that can be accounted for. And a lot of nonprofit has to be, okay, so person's salary is $100,000 a year. Let's just take that. And we're giving $25,000. Quarter of their time needs to be this, and they account to us for that as part of their funding. So that can be done.
Yeah, so I mean, it essentially has to be
And that way
100%
you're not having, and with a fund approach, that way you're not having to get timesheets and all, and get into day-to-day stuff you don't want
And
to.
I think that was why we decided to put that in there, because we didn't want to go into that.
Right, but I think you can do it another way, which is, okay, we're funding you just like any other nonprofit would get funded, and we expect a report that 25% of their activities was, and you take and with that report, at the end of it, they can account to that fund, and that's how a lot of nonprofits do it. Because there's lots of nonprofits that will fund, pieces of different people's jobs, and they've got a report to be at the end of it that the grant was used for that purpose.
So what we really need to know is actually how much do we get? We don't really know how much we get actually, because it varies from time to time.
If you would, if you decide, and again, this is not something you have to do. I mean, you guys can put these limitations if you want. If it is something where you want to look at funding a position or something along those lines, what you ask for in the application is, okay, what percentage of somebody's, your ask is X number of dollars, what percentage of their salary is this going to be? And then we need a guarantee from you that that's that much of their time working for you is in the tourism world. That's all that you guarantee, and then they do a fund accounting at the end as their final report.
And that's where that application.
But it's still an administrative cost that we
Correct,
say we won't do.
if you adopt it, right,
Get it.
Right
correct.
down to health insurance, things like that, if they were eligible for those things, those are administrative
So
costs.
what we need to do is change this general administrative cost and rewrite that out to where it's,
If you want to fund this kind of projects, that's correct, and salaries, but that's up to you guys. You guys can impose these, you cannot impose these. These are your guys' guidelines. So it's up to you what you were looking for.
Yeah, well, I don't know if anybody.
well, after meeting with Ginger and Ann and what they explained to us of what they're doing, is trying to bring in businesses and stuff like that here. So,
And also the fact that there was potentially with this, there was a lot of match potential from outside agencies.
Ginger wants to talk.
Could I just give you a little bit of an update? After we had our meeting, it was a Friday, I think it was Monday or Tuesday, I got an email from Oregon Community Foundation. And we've moved from they're starting their due diligence with all of the applications. And we are now in the grant, what do they call it? Community grant reviewer process, where they actually send somebody out to meet with us and with others that are involved in whatever it is that we're going to be doing project-wise or whatever. So we have a meeting with the grant reviewer who is out of Medford on September 4th. And so it'll be the chamber, it'll be Jessica and myself and Ann and Ray, Ray Sims and I believe Sandy, that will be meeting because they want to have a part of what that position will be doing is working with the group that is going to be working in downtown. It's the, excuse me, I don't know what's going on. Maybe I've got some hay fever going on here.
Water?
No, I'm good. The Lakeview, I'm sorry, I'm trying to think how we're calling ourselves, the Lakeview Partners Collaboration Group that is part of the Rural Tourism Studio, what the Chamber is doing, what Occupy East Street is doing, what LCP is doing. That position will help coordinate that group so that we don't have all these factions going off and doing all their own thing, that there's some sort of coordinated effort downtown. So anyway, my point is that they're gonna be here we've made it into the second step, basically. So part of what they're gonna be asking you is asking us is what the status is of the requests that we've made of other entities such as yourself and Ford Family. And then I've got another one that's coming right up too, that we haven't made application for yet, but I just got it yesterday, I think, the information,
So
the USDA.
can we ask how much the grant is for?
For OCF?
Can you
You
just-
can, I'm just trying to remember, because there's money in there for strategic planning.
Other things?
It's got two different things going on with it. I'm trying to remember if it was 15 or 20. I don't remember, I'm sorry. I can find out, I can look and
That's
let you
okay.
know. Yeah.
So what we're saying, I guess, to make it shorter and direct, is if we want to think about sometime in the future providing money for that position, it would have to be that he would use, or she would use that money towards tourism activities.
Yeah.
And we can set that percentage when we do it, is that correct? Like 25%, well, not,
No.
that's not correct, all of what we give them.
Whatever,
He has to,
whatever
yeah.
percentage of their salary that a grant you
Yeah.
guys make is, that's how much of their time needs to be dedicated to tourism.
Right. So what could possibly happen is that you decide to give us 25, or maybe you decide to give us 10 or whatever. So when we finally get all of our money for this, because it's the same thing as going on with the other folks that we've applied to. So when we finally settle down at the first of the year and know what we've got, then we'll figure out what percentage each one of those is gonna be, and then that's what we're responsible to report to you about. Does that make sense?
So,
And then,
yes, so
and then
in effect,
you guys have backup then to, if somebody comes and asks questions about it.
so then in effect, you really would maybe know, because I think January was one of our dates when we had to have new applications, and so you could have a little better idea of what you might need from us, or not.
Well, we're hoping that we're going to do the project that's gonna kick off, that we're gonna be able to hire somebody in January.
Yeah.
That's why, I mean, we've.
So you
yeah.
will have some of these grants will be decided that you are applying for now.
Yes, and hopefully you folks will have a decision also.
Now, is this a one-time deal, or is this gonna be an ongoing?
Well, I mean, if they,
I think,
successful, somebody's gotta fund it again the
I
next
don't
year.
know if that's in this thing, but I think people, in my opinion anyway, would need to apply every year for those.
Right,
Yeah, 'cause they're
we
one
might,
time.
Okay,
you know, it depends on how we do that first year. Where we're at right now with our whole, with all of this, is that we can't go much further and doing much more with what we're doing right now without having a staff person that's dedicated to writing grants and to leveraging the monies. It's very similar to what we did with the Alger. We did not have a staff person for that. I mean, we had part of Melissa's time. She and I worked together on that to get, the funds for that. But, so that's what this is for. We would hope that within a year, we would at least have the ability to raise enough money to at least partially fund that position.
or we could do, maybe, I don't know, maybe this isn't the right way to do it, but like this general administrative cost with the exception of tourism-related programs or something like that.
We don't want it to be, except we want it to be used for.
Yeah, that's the state law requirement.
You would
That's
put
the.
general administrative costs related to tourism.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, these are additional,
Well, that's not
everything,
eligible for
Yeah.
funding, so we wouldn't.
everything you have to do has to be related to tourism in those categories on the first page.
Yeah.
So that's the floor, that's the bare minimum requirements. These requirements are the ceiling about what, and everything between the floor and the ceiling is what you guys fund.
Okay. So that was my biggest thing that I had was on this general administrative costs and stuff, but if it's tourism, I have no problem,
Well, yeah.
And again, you also can keep some control of this by looking at project application. I mean, there's certain things you exclude, but the other thing you can do is just be careful what projects you select. If you guys don't, there's certain ones in there that, especially things like political activity and things like that.
Right.
Those are clearly problematic. But your things like your salary, admin costs, or ongoing or operating costs may not be the worst thing if you're trying to do a bigger campaign. If that's something that you're interested in. If you're not, that's fine too. If you want to keep it in more one-off events where you're, helping defray the cost, I mean, it's the council's policy determination. So that's what you guys need to see, what kind of projects you're looking to do. If you want to have a bigger, if you guys want to have a bigger range of stuff to select, then strike admin costs, salaries, and operating costs. If you don't, if you want to keep it more to discrete events where you're helping with the setups and things like that, then keep those in there. That's your guys' decision. So it depends on what you guys are looking at trying to do.
I think that the reason why, that not eligible list was in a lot of the communities that we looked at was for a reason. I kind of see both sides of it. I knew what the whole project was for. I talked to Ann a long time ago about it, so I was very well aware. I really am concerned that if we eliminate those, then it's going to be, and I'll be real honest, I feel like it's going to be expected that we must approve. And if we don't approve something, or let's say we approve it, then the next year we decide not to go with it because we want to use those funds elsewhere, I'm concerned that that position or something significant, like a job, I mean, that's essentially a job that we're funding, is going to be affected greatly.
Yeah, and that's probably true, but I think we just need to
Be upfront that this is a commitment
this is a
for.
one-year commitment, and that's, we will reconsider it at the next goal.
No, and
But
I understand that, and I think, I know I've been involved in the group that's been meeting, that was a collaboration of entities, and so I know what the goal is and what the process is and what they're doing. I just kind of see both sides of where it could bite us in the hiney later, or could,
From a legal standpoint, it will not, because your commitment is
It's more
the
of
grant. Right, it's more of a,
personal,
right.
Okay, you guys approved it this year, now we've got to go lay off this employee because you cut our funding, didn't renew the funding, I should say, or something like that. Or us just turning down because we're getting so many applications for administrative costs and salaries that aren't as directed as what, we want to go with projects or programs and events.
One thing I'm gonna tell you about this pool of money, you're gonna make people unhappy, because you don't have trillions and trillions of dollars. Even if you did, they'd all get spent. I mean, if we had a tourism fund, for example, that was worth $1 billion, trust me, somebody would find ways of spending it because it's an available source of money. So unfortunately, you're gonna have to make decisions. Anytime you have a grant process, that's the nature of grants. You gotta say yes to some people and no to some people, and it's uncomfortable, but it's the pot of money you have and it needs to be spent. So that's
If we have like 20 applicants, we obviously aren't probably going to be able to fund them all. So we just have to make the choices, and that's our responsibility. And if people don't like it, then I guess they can vote for something else.
exactly right.
It's like
Next
having,
election.
so much money to pay your bills, and you got to figure out which one either way, and some of them are not going to get paid,
Yeah, I mean, it's not always,
Yeah.
an easy decision to make, but.
The other flip side is
We
we
have
need
to
to figure out.
consider which would be the most
So
worthwhile.
how do you want to write this in there then as for general administrative costs for?
I need the council's direction if that stays in or stays out. And for, that's the point of this work session. I need a consensus from you guys about what you're wanting, in those categories, what you're wanting to see. What you want to prohibit, what you don't.
That's the only one that it is, I think, questionable for us.
Well, it depends on, I think you've got three.
Salaries,
You've got general administrative costs, salaries, and ongoing operating costs. Those three,
What number is that?
that would be 1,
Oh.
6,
And so,
and 7. And I think the rest of them make a lot of sense.
salaries, I think, should not be in there.
Well,
Then you're prohibiting the LCPs.
Which we're not making a decision on that. I mean, I understand that we have that on the table, but we aren't making a decision on that.
Correct.
So we can't write these based on that necessarily.
No, and that, but it's that type of, if you prohibit salaries, then you have prohibited that kind of request.
Well, I thought we were talking about general administrative costs, so that's two separate things.
But
They are.
Yeah, but salaries and operating costs are all basically in the general administrative costs.
They could be considered subcomponents of that, yes.
Yeah. So, so if you're gonna do this, then you're gonna have to include 6 and 7 in with 1.
It's not necessarily, administrative costs are not necessarily salaries. They could be.
But they can be, what bothers me a little bit about that term is I think it can encompass those, so it gets a little bit, that's why I think they've been defined as well, but, because like I said, administrative costs could be a facilities rental that, an office building that somebody has every year, there's a rental on that would be one of those, but salary isn't, so they are components of it.
But then again, you could also put in travel and mileage under administrative costs.
Correct, but if you took out the general category and then did the subcategories that you wanted,
So eliminate 1, but keep 6, 7.
if that's what you want to do, yes. But that's up to the council.
Oh,
I
is
just,
that Nikki now?
Well, if you eliminated 1, I mean, really, you're kind of keeping it, really. I mean, it's not.
Well, yeah, I just wonder how many more requests we're gonna get for salaries, in which we will not necessarily have a great way of determining how much they're using for tourism,
Well,
except
my
by
concern is
saying
the
a certain
time.
percentage.
You know, I mean, it's gonna take somebody at the town administrating, obviously, town manager, reviewing these documents.
No,
No.
where it comes down to is the final report and the progress report.
That's what I'm talking about, those
And
documents.
so that is on the entity. That's not on you guys. I mean, there is a review,
Well-
there is the review process.
Yeah.
But if it's a proper nonprofit, they're gonna have a pretty good breakdown, because especially if you're doing matching funds or something along those lines, there's a pretty detailed breakdown that has to get done with those to keep those up every year.
But we still have to review them. I mean, we have to
True.
make sure that those documents are true and accurate, and
Mhm.
because we are held liable to those.
Okay.
I just had a thought, I don't know what this means, but you could also possibly get requests from an entity for a project or an event that will include some of the money that they are requesting could be a contract to somebody for services or to provide something for that. I don't know where that, I'm just,
Garbage
I don't know.
pickup at the fair or.
well, or
parking
even
attendants.
hiring somebody that is gonna be coordinating some of it or
Mhm.
something. I don't know,
Correct.
I'm just,
That's why I was saying if you take out 1, but you leave 6, 7, 8. Those are
Yeah,
more
but then the
specific.
master plan one has a bit of a problem, because that could be seen as a salary. That's what gets a little,
that's where it gets sticky.
it gets sticky.
It does.
You either prohibit the whole thing, or it gets hard to get into the gradations
Yeah.
of it. So
We
you either,
eliminate it, and we can always say no. I mean, if we get something that we just feel like is not.
yeah, and if you guys don't really feel comfortable being able to track with that organization, or if you don't trust the organization, you are within your perfect rights
Yeah.
to say, you're too new, we don't know enough about you. And the answer is no, like I said, I mean, a brand new foundation that started up tomorrow that was, kind of a one-man show or whatever, and may sound the best in the world, then you guys just don't have a good feel from and you want to make a policy decision, you're perfectly entitled to do this. None of this stuff in here says you have to give to any particular entity. These are just, you're in this category, you can't have it, and then everything else is a discretionary decision. This does not entitle anybody to a legal entitlement unless you enter into a long-term agreement with somebody to fund them over and over again until, the only legal entitlement is once they've signed that sample grant contract and the duration of the award you make.
Yeah, I'm conflicted about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, we're gonna have to eventually make a consensus. It may require more thought on our parts. Is there other sections that were of concern, or you said grammar?
Just some grammar fixes in different places. we've got the basics, some, gosh, because Word is so wonderful with spacing, there's a few other things that have kind of gotten, and then just making things a little more, and I've got some of it out of there. But yeah, no, I
There's
think
one
that,
I see right now, page 3, the very bottom, permitting and licensing.
right.
Proof of insurance in
In a form and amount. Acceptable
And,
town.
okay, there we go.
Because the problem with putting a particular level, certain activities are more risky than others. An event that, let's say for example, somebody comes in one year and wants to spend the entire thing and put on something fairly close to the size of the roundup, there's gonna be 900 people there, $1 million insurance policy may not be adequate. So you guys may wanna, ensure a form and amount, acceptable town, like your name and town, because this will sure is necessary, yeah.
So could we say something like, never mind.
I just needed to take out and, or put and instead of and. I need that to be.
And actually, I can make these changes, I've got a flavoring document, so.
Okay.
On the application, which is on page 6,
6,
this total project indicate how grant funds could be used. Should it say which of the below, because not all of these, everything we allow is not going to be necessarily for these things here.
so just fill out the ones that they're,
Yeah.
Yeah, they would only
Fill out the,
they would only fill out where it's applicable.
yeah, that's what I'm saying, we should add that. Indicate, I haven't got the wording down here, but
well, it says right here.
Where applicable.
LTLT grant funds would be used.
attach sheet of, doesn't say it, if applicable.
Yeah, great, it looks like there's some of the, boy, Word did a great job of formatting on this. On community improvements, it looks like that needs to be flipped, the spacing needs to be flipped around, that's kind of,
Oh, yeah.
gosh. It's the reason why I
Which
always
one?
did, yeah, on page 6, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down, community improvements. But I do think that makes sense,
Indicate which of the below
indicate which of the below,
the TLC grant funds would be used. And don't end it with for, that's a preposition.
it might not hurt to have a space for other too, because there might be something outside this would still be considered.
well, actually, these,
Well, these are pretty,
These are pretty much specific to what the grant is
Yeah.
supposed to be
Right.
used for.
but I haven't had a chance to really read the rest of it actually, so.
and then at the very end of 7, compliance with current state, federal, and municipal law.
Page 7, where?
Yeah, the very last sentence.
Oh,
Oh.
By sentence
current-
definition.
Okay.
current state and municipal.
Current state, federal, and municipal law.
Okay,
And reporting process, applicants that are worth more than $5,000 in funding are required to submit both a progress report on a date to be determined by the town council page 3, and a final report within 30 days of the project, program, or event is finished to the town council.
Okay, I'm back on page 1, under definitions down on B. I don't think it's good to just say that they have to stay overnight.
That's the whole point of what tourism, this is the state of
Well, yeah,
Oregon's
but if someone
definition.
comes here from Klamath Falls for the rodeo, you know, they're going to pay a lot of money, they're going to eat, they're going to, and then maybe drive home the same day. And so,
So that's why it's an or, that's why it's an or, requires person to travel over 50 miles from community residence or includes an overnight stay. Those are actually the state
State
definition.
guidelines, yeah, we can't change those.
I
But
think,
it's not saying they have to stay, it's that or.
Yeah,
They
it's-
travel more than 50 miles. And or, well, or.
right.
yeah, well.
I agree with you, it's a little bit, and then, like I
It
said,
shouldn't say if they came here and, what did I write down here? Use our, you know, other business, actually include the following, limit to other, businesses, you know, that they're going to spend money.
I'd agree with you, but they wrote this law in terms of Portland area, so they consider a 50-mile radius around the town, the local area, even though that's ridiculous for us. It's still kind of, because like I said, somebody's coming from 40 or 50 miles, 40 miles away, that's still likely considered tourism, because they usually got a store or whatever, but that's what the state has picked, so.
West side of the town, the state, we don't consider it traveling when you drive 20 miles to the next town. We used to do that all the time, and that was like
Because I thought it should read
much different here.
with the possibility of patronizing Lakeview businesses and attractions.
I agree.
I agree.
Perfect sense.
Yeah.
But that's.
I worked hard on that, dang it.
I know. And honestly, it wouldn't be a bad, Sandy, you might send that to me, I kinda like that, because that might be something Orla might, that would be the entity to give that to, because they might be able to get a legislator to actually look at, you know. Because, you know, somebody and you would think in the Willamette Valley they do the same, because somebody goes 20 miles outside of Salem and is going to one of the smaller towns around there to a fair or whatever, that's a tourist. But
Yeah.
anyway,
I
They
mean,
just don't
they
stay.
come here for, I mean, I don't know, a lot of events, like the car show, but maybe they're not gonna stay overnight, they just come
And that's why it says or.
and they spend money here and support
Right.
restaurants.
but they live within 30 miles, yeah, I understand, it's an artificial definition, but it's what they've done, so. I would also recommend at the top of number 2, eligibility, we take out, just make it includes governmental entities, nonprofit organizations, and for-profit entities. Yeah, I don't know that you want to specify 50, because 501c3s are by definition nonprofits. There's not all nonprofits qualify as 501c3.
Right.
But if we're not going to make that a distinction, because we're allowing other kinds of nonprofits in there that don't qualify as 501c3, I think that gets a little bit superfluous.
So just say nonprofit organizations
Organizations.
and for-profit entities.
Yes. Mhm. Yep, get rid of the and. And then in the next paragraph, multiple grant applications per year may be considered
Yeah.
for any single any single applicant. Applicant, period. If an applicant,
Cross off organization or business?
yeah, just change that to applicant, because we already said who the applicants are
Yeah.
in the prior paragraph.
Anyone applicant.
If an applicant has been previously worked with a town like you'll be considered for a grant if all previously awarded grants complied with grant agreement requirements and procedures, filing progress reports. And then I still like the term, you know, since grants are funded for revenues, lodging tax recipients are asked not to request discounts for lengthy lodging purposes for the proposed
Yeah.
you know, and I'm wondering, maybe we ought to put, because that lodging tax applies to all, I'm wondering if there's a better term we can use for, because.
I think we're beating this to death. This has been used by, I mean, we didn't come up with this.
True.
ourselves.
And I think they're trying to keep general, I just, it's a little informal, but I think, yeah, I think we're right, I think that works. Because I just wanna make sure that, you know, because again, we wanna make sure we're getting in, you know, the local RV parks, Airbnbs, all the various flavors, because it's not just hotels anymore, I mean, we're getting lodging tax from anybody that's using, even, you know, just renting out their house for the weekend, so. But I think lodging properties works.
Yeah.
Good.
And I do have somewhere to be.
Right now?
So,
Here,
so what you need from us is give you permission to go, the consensus to go ahead and,
I don't know that you guys have it yet, because it's coming down to,
I think
what are you wanting to, it's still that section, activities not eligible for funding.
Yeah.
that and the percentage discussion that we need to have and kind of whether or not we want to set aside a percentage. That's our other big one, I think, that we need to make a decision about.
Yeah. You want to subject all your funds to this? Do you want to have a large project version of this and a small project where you're doing certain things?
I know you like that.
I don't care. That's just what a lot of other entities have done, depending on, I don't have a dog in this hunt. It's just, these are just different policy options that you guys can do.
Yeah.
I'm not
I know
for
what I
any
think
particular
about
project
it.
or not for any project. It's just, I want you, it depends on what, from a policy standpoint, you guys are wanting to select on this.
I want to personally research that some more and do some more thought on that myself and see where I kind of feel on whether or not we want to put that limitation or not. Kind of weigh the pros and cons for myself, like whether or not that's something I think we should do. And what percentage. Okay, I want to see what the other towns are doing that are small, whether or not they're doing it, you know. That's, I mean, I know we have that book and there's some in there, I think, that it mentions it, but not a whole lot. So I'm wondering if they just didn't put it in there for that very reason of whether or not they wanted to limit themselves.
Right. And again, you still do have the option of just saying no to people. I mean, that's not a, you
Yeah,
know.
that's, well, we have that option whether we put the percentage in there or not. I mean,
Or if you put, but like I said, but if you had dropped anything under that section that's activities not eligible for funding, they're not eligible, period. They're not even gonna get considered. If they're in that category, that application is circular filing because it's not in you guys' guidelines you've set. So that's the only thing I'll tell you. That area right there, that is your top level of, you know, that's the top level requirements of, you know, what you're gonna allow, so.
It can also be amended at a later date if something doesn't work or
Yeah, 'cause
becomes unnecessary.
if you just, that's not difficult to do.
Yeah.
No, this is a resolution, this is being
This is-
adopted by resolution,
it's
this is not an ordinance.
Yeah, I know.
Because this is a policy that you guys are doing for how you're doing it.
My thought process, what if we want to be more prudent right now and then we see we get no applications and then we change that down the road?
Well, that's
Do we
what
want to do
I
that, do we not want to
feel about, you know, the big projects that,
be more prudent? Yeah.
well, because we don't know how many we will get.
And we are still waiting on our accounting-ish.
I think we know how much we have in the lodging tax fund as far as, we know what the balance is of that, so.
Or,
we did have, what,
18, 19?
66,000,
Yeah,
and then we just wrote, I think, 6,000 worth of checks.
right.
So we're down to 60, round, roughly.
is that for 18, 19?
Yeah.
No.
Because we've only, yeah, that was
Because we
at
just
the end of
finished
June,
that.
we had 66,000.
Yes. So yeah, you have a balance, it just hasn't been spent. But there wasn't a lot done with it when it started being collected. So
I
you
guess
get-
I thought we thought it was higher than that.
And that's the one other thing I would tell you is you're in a unique position having a large balance of it now versus what may change depending on, because, you know, you're in kind of a unique position right now with a lot of full occupancy because of a lot of construction workers and stuff being in a lot of different places, so. But as, for a little while, but once they've stayed past 30 days, then the lodging tax no longer applies. So you're kind of, like I said, this isn't always the most stable source of funding, so that's the one thing, that's why quarterly is probably a good idea, because at least you'll have some idea. But just, I would be really careful committing long-term unless you already have the money in the account to do anything, because you're never gonna know, you know.
Yeah, some years are gonna be better than others.
Exactly.
And, yeah, and we.
Because they ran into that problem over in Jackson County where, you know, the tourism venues were gone basically because the smoke was so bad, nobody came in, so they were way down on their revenues. So,
It was really good this year.
Yeah. Do the little campground we have
Mannequin?
on the end of South Third Street, is that a lodging tax?
It's an RV park.
Oh.
It's an RV?
I think those are long-term occupants, I believe.
No, we
No, that's open
advertising
for
it
Roundup.
Yeah, he's advertising.
elsewhere, otherwise also.
Though, then the overnight, the ones that are staying less than 30 days should be paying it. The ones that are over, once it turns into like more of like a landlord-tenant situation, they are not. So, you know,
So
if,
30
for example,
days
like
is
the
the
Lakeview Lodge rents a room for like 2 months, lodging tax goes away because that's more of a long-term accommodation, so.
Yeah,
Which makes sense because that's not really a tourist at that point, that's somebody sticking around for a
living
long
here, yeah.
Right, for a period of time.
So do we need to hold another work session?
I wonder if we need to have one before our meeting on Tuesday to,
You could actually set it like at 5 o'clock or something
I'm not
along.
available Monday, no.
No, on Tuesday,
Oh,
you guys
Tuesday.
could put a work session at like
Yeah.
5.
It's at 6 on Tuesday.
right.
Mhm.
Yeah, we could do
oh, that's
that.
right.
We're gonna have to,
Well, will it take more than an hour?
because we need to get this thing in place.
I think 5 o'clock on Tuesday makes sense.
Because our meeting's at 6, so we should be able
Is
to.
it 6 or 6:30?
6 o'clock.
So we'll just schedule a work session for next
Right.
Tuesday at 5 o'clock.
Yep.
And hopefully we'll have this finished
And I
up.
will be able to make the work session, I will not be able to make the council meeting, so.
Pardon?
I've got a conflict, so I can make the work session, I can't make the main council meeting. But once you guys get the tweaks in there, we can make those in between and then have it adopted. You know, as long as the work session's short. You might want to make the work session 4 o'clock or 4:30, so that there's time, if there's any other major tweaks you want to make, that it can get put in before, because this is the attachment to that resolution. If you're wanting to adopt, do you guys think you're going to be in a position to want to adopt Tuesday night? That's the tough, you may not want to. The other option is you could take that out of the main agenda and just do a special meeting next week, like on Wednesday or something, just on this issue, have the work session and
I'd
then
like to get
adopt.
this done.
Yeah.
Right,
We
Before
can
Roundup.
check with Scott and Darwin maybe and see if 4:30 works for them, or, I mean, I can bring my laptop and change them as we speak and then print them immediately, you know, type
Well,
thing.
They can't vote that way.
if you guys come to
You know,
consensus,
asking them if they're going to be able to make 4:30 or 4
Oh,
4:30 for the
5.
work session,
Yeah,
and then,
because there's no point
When we-
holding it then if they
then
can't
when we
make
go
it.
into regular session, we can vote.
We may have the agenda, yeah, we may be prepared, I mean, we can make changes.
we
immediately,
may or may
print
not,
that,
because we have to have the actual document in front of us.
Which we can do.
Changes.
We'll have to-
oh, that's right.
Unless 24 hours.
Yeah, that document would have to be posted within 24 hours. So even if, so you can't, you can do the work session, but you're gonna have to do, I think you need to make, if you're gonna wanna get it done, you need to do a special
Yeah,
session.
That's fair next week, so.
I know.
We have to do it Wednesday. I won't be here Wednesday. Because Thursday is show day. So.
Yeah, well, we could almost do it,
Okay, I'm gonna be late.
take Tuesday, well, Friday
I know.
isn't very good either.
No,
around that.
show day as well. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't wanna do anything, especially, yeah.
From like Wednesday on.
Yeah.
And we could do it
Seems
Wednesday.
pretty close. I mean, you can make the changes you put on, we can put it in front of you.
Yeah, I'd say just let's have the work session, we'll go from there. If we could get it in Wednesday, if we get it in Wednesday, I mean, we can't unfortunately change the fair,
Or
so.
we would have to have it the Wednesday after that problem, maybe.
or the following week, yeah. And that was Tuesday at school.
Yeah. So, anyway,
We certainly can't make any, I mean, we could try to do it Monday, but I won't be available. I don't know if anybody else will be.
on Monday,
Well, all
Labor Day?
Pretty much,
For the next Monday.
pretty much, after Tuesday, everything's tied up,
Mhm.
so Tuesday's about the only day we've got till after roundup,
Yeah, no.
so. We'll just go ahead and do the work session at
And we'll just
4:30
go
on
from there,
Tuesday.
and just do the best we can.
And then
No.
All right, I'm about to break your quorum, so.
finish it up after roundup.
Yep.
Yeah,
So I just, can you repeat what your plan is about your timeline right now? I'm just trying to,
Okay, we're planning to have a work session next Tuesday,
at 4:30.
Or 5.
4:30. The meeting is at 6. And we are hoping that everything will be settled at that work session, and we will be able to vote on this the Wednesday
Next one.
after roundup.
Wednesday before roundup or Wednesday after roundup.
Will that
To
be the
vote on
next-
it?
The document
No.
would
Special
exist
session.
24 hours ahead though.
It would be if we held it at 6 o'clock.
No, our meeting is Tuesday, so we would have to have another meeting the next day. but-
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Oh.
Special, that's what Jeff said, is to do a special.
And the problem is, if you don't, yeah, it would be,
I think it's probably pushing
it,
it.
would be-
it's too tight. I
You
think
can't give it 24-hour notice.
if you don't have the document finalized by
Because we
5
won't-
o'clock,
We would not be out of here because our meeting is until 6.
yeah, so it's not gonna be in a final form, so you're not gonna be able to do it that Wednesday. So you're looking at the Tuesday or Wednesday after roundup.
Right. Well, yeah.
so it'd be,
Is that-
Either of those 2 days is okay for me.
and then vote on it on September 4th, is that what you're saying?
Yeah. 4th or 5th, whatever day we decide on.
The 4th is on Wednesday.
Oh, the 4th is Wednesday, that's right,
Yep.
yeah.
So Dawn, you will not be back till
I won't
Wednesday.
be back till the following Wednesday. I'm taking my vacation time.
So that's
So-
Wednesday, the 4th.
I have to go because I have a teenager about to lose their lid for being late, so.
Can you do a meeting next Wednesday after roundup at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock? So let's just set that meeting now, where we have at least the majority of you guys here. So the next meeting after this, after the work session, will be Wednesday,
The 4th,
the 4th,
at 4.
at 4. With not a work session, but a general session, a special meeting on just lodging tax.
Okay,
So it'll be special meeting.
Yes,
4 o'clock, you said?
Yep.
All right.
okay.
Meeting
Nothing
adjourned.
else, we will adjourn the meeting at 4:53.